Allora ragazzi, oggi voglio andare un pochettino più veloce con le introduzioni perché voglio vedere insieme a voi un paio di video che sono anche lunghetti, ok? Sono da 20 minuti l'uno, quindi credo che sia il caso di darsi un po' una mossa, perché se no non riusciamo a fare il resto delle cose. Sapete che tra pochi giorni esce la nuova espansione di World of Warcraft. Mi sono già pronunciato in merito, sapete che sono in un periodo conflittuale con World of Warcraft, ma devo dire che Dragonflight, che ho recuperato tardivamente giusto per avere cognizione di causa, alla fine devo dire che non mi ha affatto dispiaciuta come espansione e credo che abbiano fatto delle cose buone. Sta per uscire The War Within e sul canale proprio ufficiale di World of Warcraft sono stati pubblicati un po' di video, di cui due li voglio vedere insieme a voi. Uno che riguarda proprio la struttura del gioco, che secondo me è la cosa più interessante. L'altra, che secondo me è l'altra cosa più interessante, riguarda lo storytelling. Quindi voglio vedere questi due video insieme a voi. D'accordo? Quindi i sottotitoli sono in inglese tradotti in italiano, ma non sono i sottotitoli automatici, quindi troppo dovrebbe andare. Chris, grazie mille del follow, benvenuto. Allora, si va ragazzi, spegniamo la musica di sottofondo, accendiamo l'audio, le cuffie ce l'abbiamo. Allora, questo è il video descrittivo di The War Within, come dovrebbe essere la struttura del progress, cioè raid, dungeon, PvP e soprattutto, che è la cosa che mi interessa di più, i delves, che dovrebbe essere proprio il nuovo filone di progressione, cioè delle attività in più da fare. Ok? Sono proprio delle cose extra. Se non ti piacciono raid, dungeon o PvP, c'è questa cosa in più. Bene.
Welcome to a special edition of WowCast, and thank you so much for joining us. Launch is right around the corner, and today we are joined by a few incredible guests to share how dungeons, raids, and PvP has evolved, as well as new features like delves and warbands. Please introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Laura Sardinia. I'm lead UX designer in the WUOI team.
Hey, I'm Morgan Day, one of the associate game directors on World of Warcraft.
And I'm John Mark Hempel. I'm a lead gameplay engineer on World of Warcraft.
How has the team been approaching what's waiting for players at max level for the War Within?
As we've been talking about, the content that players will be experiencing once they reach the end game, there's really been three main pillars we've been focusing on.
Benvenuti ragazzi, quelli che si stanno connettendo adesso.
There's all kinds of activities for you to do, whether it be in the outdoor world or with some of our new features like delves that are really going to add some new variety for those players. Additionally, we really want to focus on progression and giving players new challenges to try to overcome in the end game. And finally, the story and making sure that that narrative is front and center. Now, whether that's tied into some of these features and some of the content that we built there, or maybe it's focused on the end game campaign that is going to be built out as players progress as well. Something that I think is going to be really transformative and I'm excited about for the War Within is one of our major features, warbands. If you aren't familiar, this is a feature that really ties all your characters together. And really this is our opportunity to make sure that we're really respecting the time of the player behind the keyboard and not constantly asking you to, maybe re-earn something on one character that you've already earned on another one. That's all changing with the War Within, which is really exciting.
Allora, qui mi voglio fermare un attimo ragazzi, perché questa è una cosa che è stato già detto all'ultima presentazione, alla release, al primo annuncio di The War Within, ed è stata una delle cose di cui abbiamo già parlato, che francamente ho trovato molto figa. Ma non è solo una questione di caratteristiche, è che dovete capire una cosa: per anni e anni la community di WoW ha accusato World of Warcraft di non rispettare il tempo del giocatore. Perché? Perché proponeva una serie di attività, una serie di ostacoli palesemente artificiali messi lì apposta, una serie di azioni che ti fanno perdere tempo, anche questo apposta, giusto per piazzarti là e sostanzialmente spingerti, il più possibile a loggare ogni giorno, stare più tempo possibile. In sostanza i giocatori si sentivano presi in giro, non rispettati nel loro tempo di utilizzo di World of Warcraft. Sentire che con la nuova espansione il team, e non è certo la prima volta che lo fa, proprio all'inizio, nella presentazione delle nuove feature del gioco, parla di rispetto del tempo del giocatore, è una cosa che chi segue WoW da anni Sente come, non lo so, avete mai conosciuto una persona che sono anni che gli dici di fare una cosa che ti dà veramente fastidio, ti sta sul cazzo profondamente, che fa o che non fa, e a distanza di tantissimi anni alla fine comincia a farla veramente e tu quasi non ci credi? Ecco, questa è la sensazione che sto provando adesso, in questo momento. Ok, vai, andiamo avanti.
John Mark, can you tell us more about the significant undertakings that warbands is about?
Yeah, it's no easy task to reimagine in a modern context what we've done over the past 20 years. I think, Morgan, at BlizzCon, you called this several features in a trench coat.
Yeah.
And it's very true. In a nutshell, it's really a philosophical shift in how we approach the game.
Sì, da me ha rinfrescato, è passato dal caldo torrido insopportabile all'allagamento della città. Vabbè. Scusate.
Historically, we've added on pieces to individual systems from the engineering side to support features going into expansions. But if we could wave a magic wand and go back 20 years ago, knowing where we're headed today, likely we would have organized those things very differently from an engineering perspective.
Yeah, and I really feel like this is easily one of the largest undertakings that our engineering team has had to develop for an expansion. We always used to look at updates to future patches where like, let's make this a little bit easier for your alt to catch up or earn some progression there, where now that is something that we're really architecting from the forefront and really beginning the conversation with that.
I think when it's all said and done, every engineering sub-team is going to
Ciao Ale, ciao Marsito, ben trovati.
So what value do warbands bring?
It's all about being able to transfer stuff between your characters. If you have items that you want to send from one character to the other, you just put it in the warband bank. If you have currency that you want to send from one character to the other, you can just grab it directly from all the characters that are on your account.
Questa è una cosa comodissima.
Old raids and you get a piece of plate gear, your warrior can just equip it.
Che figata.
Yeah, one of the things I love about it is the shared renown, right? Like there's so much reputation that
Questo già lo sapevo.
across my characters that will all be combined and
la spiego a chi non è, diciamo, tanto avvezzo alla cosa. Molto semplicemente, in World of Warcraft, quando porti avanti diversi personaggi, ovviamente tutte le cose sono per singoli personaggi. E se hai una progressione con una qualsiasi cosa all'interno del gioco, è solo per quel personaggio. Ora, qualcosina hanno fatto per mettere in comune alcune cose, ma in realtà poco. Con The War Within, invece, metteranno in comune, con quella che si chiama Warband, cioè un tuo gruppo di personaggi, metteranno in comune tutte quante le progressioni, una buona parte di progressioni. E quindi, se hai raggiunto una certa fama con una fazione in gioco, non devi rifarmare la fama della stessa fazione con un altro personaggio, cosa che ho fatto un'infinità di volte in passato. Maledizione. Ok, quindi per esempio questa è un'ottima notizia.
Consolidated on one account-wide reputation there. There's a lot of fun stuff that also enables when it comes to like trying to find more variety in the way I approach the game. For instance, I was leveling I think my second character on the beta recently, and I made sure to go out and turn Warband questing on so that I saw all the quests that I already completed. It's a little bit less opaque, so it's kind of transparent, and that way like, okay, I've done that quest on one of my other characters, so I can kind of cherry pick all the reputation from quests that I haven't completed yet. Something else when it comes to maybe gearing.
Bellissima sta cosa.
There's actually a new type of item called Warbound Until Equipped, or WU. This is a new item that will drop in all kinds of endgame content, including things like Mythic Plus and Raids, where these will be bonus drops, where they'll drop a slightly lower item level where you might have earned that reward, and then you can put that in your bank or send it to one of your alts, and actually, once you equip it on one of your characters, then it will bind to that character. So
questo è bellissimo. Un'altra cosa molto bella. In sostanza, quando tu vai a fare un dungeon o un raid di alto livello e lo vinci, eccetera, prendi dell'equipaggiamento. Puoi avere ora, con la nuova espansione, anche dell'equipaggiamento che ha la dicitura Warbound Until Equipped, ovvero che in sostanza può essere condiviso tra i tuoi personaggi fino al momento in cui lo equipaggi. Se uno dei tuoi personaggi se lo equipaggia, allora è legato a quel personaggio per sempre, ma se tu hai per esempio un mago e stai facendo un certo tipo di contenuto e il boss ti droppa un'arma per il guerriero, per il warrior, no? Che ha quella dicitura là, lo puoi prendere lo stesso e lo mandi al guerriero, il che è una figata totale.
So the fact that it binds to the warband means we can be really generous with that gear as we're dropping for alts.
I imagine
Chitabivo,
as part
grazie
of
mille del
this
follow. Benvenuto.
overhaul that it's led to some unique challenges with the UI.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. UI revamp continues, and Warbands was a great opportunity for us to revamp the character select. Last time we did a big entry screen update was during Shadowlands. So with Warbands, we did a whole big user experience revamp there. We kept the right side list,
Yes.
but now you can drag and drop
Hanno
much easier your characters.
cambiato
and
la
we have a
schermata
favorite
di login
section there,
finalmente.
which is really cool because they're all cross-helm characters that you can have. So you don't need to be back and forth choosing characters. They're all gonna be there for you, very, very easy. And also the tooltips are all new. Now you just mouse over and it's all there for you. So pretty great improvements overall. And also the new bank for your Warband characters. So a lot of good improvements that we wanted to make sure it feels natural to players and it just feels great. That's what a good UI should be, you know? So yeah, that's what we're looking for.
There's a lot of
Che
functionality
figata.
out of that too.
Anche
you can
questo è molto
craft
bello.
straight out of your Warband bank, so you can just dump all that stuff in your Warband bank, and you know one of your other characters who might be able to use that profession stuff will then be able to access it much more quickly.
Questa funziona anche con le professioni. Se hai qualcuno che ha un certo tipo di professione e hai però i componenti che servono per quella professione su un altro personaggio, è come se li avessi anche tu e te li conta e puoi craftare. Che madonna, se è comodo. Non potete capire quanto tempo ho passato a mandarmi cose tra i vari personaggi di qualsiasi tipo.
You don't have to
Fa risparmiare una marea di tempo sta
really
cosa.
looking to streamline a lot of those experiences.
Dragon Ball Lady,
For
ciao!
Mythic Plus runners or dungeons, any kind of activity that requires a group, we also revamped that left panel, the little ear pane that you push it out. You can now apply grade markers much easier. You can also assign different folks in your group to do so, which before wasn't that easy. And also you can change very easily as well the difficulty of the instance.
One of the other things I love that we added is hubs, right? So on the main map, there's often, as you are progressing in the end game, there's all kinds of content that might be really consolidated in one area, and sometimes it's like, oh, there's so much stuff here, and it makes the map feel like it might have a little bit of clutter on it. So we now have a way to kind of consolidate some of that.
The hubs, as Morgan was explaining, when you get in the World Within, you're gonna see this castle city icon that we're gonna have in each zone. And Dornagal is the biggest one. When you click on it, you can see the city map. And one of the technologies that we wanna add, the hub gonna prioritize for you what is the most important content for you to do. Of course, you can choose to do something else, but we wanna clean up the surroundings of hubs in main cities. So that's the kind of tech that we're looking into UI as well, and we want to evolve and get players' feedback. Also for the end game, we have a new type of quest that's called meta quests, but those are in-game important repeatable quests, and then they are the classic exclamation mark, you know, above the NPC heads, but it's blue because it reminds of the old dailies, but you're gonna have spikes around it, so you know that's like, oh, I should check this out. Yeah, so the hub when there's something available as a meta quest for that week, the hub will show that to players, so you know that's something that you should do. If you don't have too much time, you probably should prioritize those because they give very, very good in-game rewards. So that's the kind of technology that UI is trying to help
Quindi
players.
le daily quest sono tornate come weekly, ma con ottime ricompense.
That's gonna be all there on the map for you, so you don't have to go back to the icon soup.
Are there any extra quality of life improvements to the UI?
Sure, I've seen a lot of the community very happy about the search bars, so we keep adding those. With Warbands, we have a search bar there as well. In Dragonfly, we had the search in the options menu. Professions, of course, if you're searching for something specific, bags, we added that in Dragonfly, and the talents. But now, the spellbook is getting a whole revamp, and it's so good to have a search bar there.
Grazie.
The spellbook looks beautiful
Esatto.
now. Like you can have 2 pages, and that way you don't have to paginate as much. But if you really prefer one pane, there is an icon at the top, which is the collapse one. It comes back to the original classic size. So we know some players really love that, and we want to make sure that everyone is happy with the new spellbook. Having the time to do all that stuff makes us so happy because we want to keep the classic WoW look, even though it looks modern, but it still feel WoW, and that's really important for us.
Morgan, earlier you mentioned you want to empower players to play the way they want to play. How is that going to be approached in the new feature Delves?
Yeah, so, like we've discussed, delves are really bite-sized content, really targeted on those players who love progression in the outdoor world and maybe aren't so excited about going into group content or queued content. Something that they gave us feedback on is that they really wish that there was a way for these to be a bit more difficult and maybe give them a bit of a challenge too. Delves, while the rewards might end at tier 8, so that the item level that you're getting stops there, the difficulty tier goes to 11. And when you reach that difficulty, there will be a hard mode version of Zekfir, which for people who might be familiar with some of those solo challenges like the Mage Tower of the past, this will be a new solo challenge for players to really, try to tackle over time. And we imagine this is something that will take quite a bit of effort and, progression to get to the point where you'll be able to defeat Zekfir at that difficulty. And waiting for you, if you're able to do that, is a really awesome, unique, kind of voided out version of that customizable delve mount that you're going to be rewarded with very early on in your delve progression.
Che figa che è.
Can you talk about the different varieties of delves?
Yeah, so with delves, there's 13 delves in total, and something that we really wanted to focus on was to make sure that each delve had multiple variants, right? So while there's 12 delves that you'll experience and be sent to, a couple in each zone, every time you zone in, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just some small tweaks here and there, like, oh, the spawning changed a little bit, or maybe there's some traps that look a little bit different. The actual objectives are changing. Sometimes the way you traverse through the delve completely changes. Maybe you're going to start at the end of the delve this time and work your way backwards. So we wanted to make sure that these different variants.
Quindi ci saranno un sacco di variazioni a questi delves, che sono sti contenuti che prima non c'erano. Speriamo che risultino intriganti.
Aspects of that. For one, the Great Vault, which is something that a lot of our Raid and PvP and Mythic Plus players are familiar with, is going to get an outdoor row with the War Within. So the loot that comes from delves, we wanted to make sure that while it was bite-sized content, that doesn't mean it can't be really rewarding, right? So if you're able to, work your way up and defeat level 8, which is where the loot kind of caps out at, your Great Vault will actually reward you with items that are higher item level than you would get out of like a Mythic plus 10 end of run chest. So it's really good loot.
Questa è piuttosto tosto, sì.
You're using that,
Ed escono buonasera.
way to work through the different delve tiers and finally, take the fight to Zekfir and by extension Xalatath as well, which also gets us into feeling like delves should be a big part of our endgame story as well, and making sure that they're paying into this narrative of Xalatath and all of our epic heroes that we're experiencing along the way. Something else that we added in the UI for delves is, there's now a whole tab that exists for delves that will exist down with the, the adventure journal, where you can see Mythic Plus and see your seasonal journey there. Now when you go to the delves tab, you can find the Great Vault from there. You can also see Bran, who's your companion. You can change his spec and see kind of the progression there. So lots of fun UI additions and improvements that have made delves that much more fun.
The team has also made significant changes to the Mythic Plus dungeons. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, so actually, not only is Mythic Plus getting some changes, but also the core progression of dungeons has shifted quite a bit. So if you've been playing Dragonflight Season 4, you might have seen that Mythic 0 has actually gotten quite the facelift. Something that we have noticed in the past is Mythic 0 was great for like 2 weeks of an expansion, and then nobody really needed to do it anymore because they had just progressed into Mythic Plus. So with the War Within, a Mythic 0 will be the equivalent of what, if you haven't played since Shadowlands, Mythic 10 might have been. So it's quite difficult and will be equally as rewarding. But, we wanted to capture that audience of people who loved that feeling of the mega dungeons where, there's still progression, but also there's no timer, right? So if that was something
allora, mi piace, hanno aggiunto un sacco di cose davvero interessanti.
Still do with your friends, and hey, you can run AFK if you need to in the middle of these. But for Mythic Plus itself, we really took a huge step back and wanted to do a major affix refresh. We have gone through multiple iterations of that on the beta. We got a lot of feedback from our first iteration of it and have really pivoted significantly since then.
It was kind of neat because we had some players that said, we really like the direction of these affixes. These I don't know about. And then other players that felt the exact opposite. I'm not sure about these, but I really like this direction. And really what it helped us crystallize was we had multiple groups of players that wanted different challenges out of the same Mythic Plus system. Historically, affixes have been a one-size-fits-all approach to challenge and variety.
Mythic Plus conosco molto poco, ragazzi, perché non le ho fatte mai.
The gameplay engineering team and was like, hey, we got this feedback, we have this idea for making affixes target different level ranges rather than applying to the entirety of Mythic Plus. And the design solution ended up being pretty elegant for engineering to implement. It was like this beautiful confluence of events where we were able to turn this around within, I don't know, 2 weeks or something like that, and get the full revamped system back on the beta for players to test.
Yeah, it was really awesome to see kind of that all come together so quickly. So, you know, what players I've seen now and what will be going live with The War Within Season 1 is a version where
Jarno, grazie mille della sub. Grazie di cuore.
You know, from the beginning up until level 12. And it's very much one of the goals we had to make sure that the story plays a part in all of our endgame content. So we really wanted to kind of achieve that by having her kind of show up in your Mythic Plus dungeon and maybe throw some spells at you and mess with you.
You know, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of World of Warcraft this year, and if you're coming back from a break or if you're a completely new player, just learning the dungeons can be daunting on top of affixes and things like that. So this sort of granular way that affixes apply challenges to the dungeons allows players to engage with them in the way that they want to be challenged.
Uova ancora a pagamento mensile? Sì.
Something that we added in Dragonflight, which
Una cosa che dovrebbero davvero fare è una versione trial più ampia,
which are not real players,
secondo me.
Playing with you through the dungeon. And let's say you just changed to a new spec, you want to be a healer now. And I really want to try that first before I really go into a dungeon with new players.
We know that players in dungeons often are
Io questa lo adoro.
trying out new specs.
Come cosa.
And with hero talents, there's different flavors of new combat for people to try out. And follower dungeons provide a way for you to just go in and feel it out and not be too concerned about how you're impacting other people.
Approachability has been mentioned a few times. How are we applying that to PvP?
Yeah, there's actually a new feature that I am personally going to play.
Sebbene abbiano semplificato, ha migliorato come richiesto dalla community. Pare di sì.
Rated Battlegrounds. It's called Rated Battleground Blitz, which is a smaller number of players, and you'll be able to earn conquest and all the awesome rated PvP rewards while playing Battlegrounds. Because we know
questa è
there's a ton of
interessante.
people who love Battlegrounds.
Io detesto le arene.
The jump into arenas sometimes might be a little bit scary. That is a much more smaller experience, and each little mistake counts for a lot when you're in an arena. Where in a battleground, there's a lot more.
Invece mi piacciono i battleground e sentire che hanno fatto quelli rated un po' più piccolini non mi dispiace affatto.
I've done a ton of, I know the community calls them YOLO RBGs, where you can just do RBGs, don't worry about voice chat, you just kind of go in and play. I always love running into those, so having this feature will kind of take that place for me. So I'll be able to earn my conquest early on in the season. I know we mentioned the Great Vault quite a bit earlier when we were discussing this. We actually got a lot of feedback from our PvP players that they don't love having to have the Great Vault be such a big part of their itemization and gearing journey. Not only does it add some potential randomization, right? Like maybe first week of the season you got a weapon and I don't, and that kind of can create some imbalance there. But also, like we're talking about accessibility, it can also cause problems where, maybe you're a couple weeks into the season and you just now want to get into PvP, but there's no catch up on the Great Vault. So you can feel like you're permanently behind on PvP, and it's maybe the barrier to entry is a little too high for you to get into that. So not having that in the Great Vault actually solves a lot of problems for us, giving players more agency and how
Striker, grazie mille del follow, benvenuto.
Also, we have much stronger catch-up on things like our conquest currency for PvP players. So we think that will be a big step forward.
No, se anche nel PvP hanno messo dei modi per avere conquest un po' più facilmente, io
Raiding is an
sono
integral part
contentissimo.
of endgame. How is the team approaching raids this tier?
Yeah, so Nerebar Palace is going to be an epic experience. Nerubians galore in there. And one of the cool new features that we're introducing with War Within is to play through the raid, or at least experience the ending with Queen Ansarak solo. So we wanted to make sure that for people who were really engaged in that story at the end game, but maybe didn't want to go into queued content or don't have a whole group to go into the raid with, they'll still be able to see that epic finale. Something else that I think is really fun, there's a lot of variety in player skill.
Quindi hanno messo la possibilità. Aspetta un attimo. Allora, qui non ho tanto capito. Questa cosa ce l'ha Final Fantasy XIV, però non ho capito se l'hanno introdotta anche su WoW nella stessa maniera. In sostanza, se tu stai facendo la storia, no? E vuoi andare nel raid, ma semplicemente perché vuoi vedere il finale della storia che arriva alla fine del raid, puoi farlo da solo? Ho capito bene? Questa è veramente interessante, sta cosa qui. Perché infatti io ho avuto dei problemi nella storia, nella serie di Dragonflight che vi ho portato, e sul secondo canale se la volete recuperare, io ho avuto dei problemi proprio lì con i raid che, specie quelli un po' più vecchiotti, c'erano dei momenti in cui giocavo io in cui semplicemente non riuscivo a trovare i giocatori, soprattutto perché lo stavo facendo con un personaggio DPS. Era difficile trovare un gruppo così al volo. Quindi avere la possibilità di fare la storia in solo per i contenuti della storia, no? Senza ricompense, chi cazzo se ne frega, se ho ben capito è così. Questo è davvero interessante, cioè è una cosa in più. Bene.
Difficulties for them, but even within a single raid, there can be a lot of, progression that you're experiencing. And with Dragonflight, we added a new item upgrade system where you could upgrade some of your gear. But some players also found that they might not be able to quite get over that hurdle on one of them, maybe the end boss or something that comes as the penultimate boss. So we're adding
la storia in solo sarebbe una svolta. Sono d'accordo.
That will unlock about a month into the War Within. That every week you'll get a little bit more powerful. It's kind of reminiscent of like Hellscream's war song back in Icecrown Citadel, but you'll have to kind of earn your way through that progression. So not only is there awesome gear to be earned as you progress through the raid, but we wanted to make sure that for people who might take a little bit longer, there's some more progression along with just the gear.
Quindi a ogni step comunque un pochettino di progresso lo fai?
Yeah, that's another really fun thing.
E si applica a tutto quanto il gruppo.
Maybe would have just been applied to a single character, but in War Within that buff is across my whole warbands.
That's cool.
While we are talking about raids, I would love to bring it up, the self-highlight option, which I'm a huge fan. You can highlight yourself and persist that. But now you can even have an icon on your head that nobody can take from you. So that is awesome. For players, I'm included, that I cannot find myself in the whole chaos of a raid boss or even Mythic Plus. There is also another option that's called Show Silhouette when Obscured. If you have that on, there is a silhouette of your character between that pillar. Let's say it's a pillar, so you see your
grazie, grazie a Dio. Perfetto, finalmente, cazzo.
And I love that, and not only those cool options, but there's
e questo
so much
punticino mi sa che lo userò.
in the War Within, and I'm really excited for our players to come on this journey with us. Both players who have been with us all through Dragonflight, as well as players who might be returning.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this look into endgame content, and we look forward to seeing you in Khazalgar.
Ok, va bene, molto molto bene. Questo è davvero interessante perché sono andati avanti un bel po' da questo punto di vista. Ciao Luigi, stiamo vedendo i contenuti di World of Warcraft, di quello che sta per arrivare, mancano pochi giorni all'uscita di The War Within. Un po' di queste cose le sapevo già perché le avevano già annunciate, ma alcune di queste le hanno o spiegate meglio o dette per la prima volta. Per esempio quella della silhouette e quella del punticino là sembra una cazzatella, però è veramente interessante. L'ultima cosa è che se sei dietro a qualcosa continua a vedersi la silhouette del tuo personaggio, e se sei in mezzo al casino delle esplosioni magiche dei raid, che certe volte è un casino, non ci si capisce un cazzo, no? Tu puoi mettere sul tuo stesso personaggio un punticino che nessun altro può togliere e che vedi solo tu, oltretutto, per ritrovarti in mezzo al casino. Questa è una cosa comoda, molto comoda. Voi ci scherzate, ma nel disastro è veramente comoda. In Final Fantasy XIV è ancora peggio con le esplosioni, però lì le esplosioni magiche le puoi togliere da opzioni di gioco e quindi puoi rendere tutto molto più intellegibile in questa maniera. In WoW no. Quindi così. Ora ci sarebbe un altro video da vedere che voglio vedere qua insieme a voi, che riguarda invece lo storytelling. E altra cosa secondo me molto importante e che in WoW io considero particolarmente, perché preferisco questo ad altri contenuti, cioè paradossalmente mi interessa più questo che Mythic Plus o Mythic Raid, decisamente. Molto comodo soprattutto se il raid è da 25, lo so.
Welcome to a special edition of WoWcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. The team is heads down on wrapping up the expansion ahead of launch, but today we are joined by a few incredible guests. Please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Maria Hamilton. I'm the Associate Design Director on WoW.
Hello, my name is Morgan Day. I am one of the Associate Game Directors working on The War Within.
And I'm Taryn Gregory, the Cinematic Narrative Director for World of Warcraft.
So how does the team even approach something as ambitious as the World Soul Saga?
In a word, enthusiastically. We have a really unique opportunity here with the 20th anniversary of World of Warcraft that's fast approaching. We really wanted to take a step back and reevaluate how we develop our expansions. In the past, we might have come at it from the perspective of, well, we've done this a couple times, how did we do it in the past? And moving forward philosophically, we really want to take a fresh new approach and take our community's excitement and feedback and really make sure that's at the forefront of all of our development moving forward. We wanted to build upon the successes of Dragonflight, right? We felt like we built a really strong foundation
Espansione mi è piaciuto di più, ma Gio Pandaria no, vabbè,
and look to achieve
Wrath of the
new
Lich King.
goals as we move in.
Però Pandaria a me è piaciuto molto.
Some of those ideas
Sono uno dei pochi, mi sa.
allowing the players to have
Secondo
new
me non
ways
siamo
to
così
express
pochi.
themselves and make sure that there's a ton of variety in the content that they're experiencing in World of Warcraft. Additionally, we want to make sure that we're bringing World of Warcraft to as broad an audience as possible, and we're really working to build new accessibility features and also just new exciting ideas that we also want to bring to the table. Finally, guiding us and crafting this epic adventure is the narrative, right? That's at the forefront of all of our ideas and all of the stories that we're developing along the way. We always like to plan ahead when we're developing World of Warcraft, but this time is a bit different, right? It's multiple expansions all at once that we're really trying to plant the seeds for these future ideas as we move forward in the World Soul Saga. And at times, I've been in meetings with our creative direction group, and it can be a bit of a challenge to keep all of these ideas in my head all at once. There's a lot of threads that are flying around, but I think the team, is really energized by that.
No, pure io mi è piaciuta molto Pandaria, visto? Saltano fuori sempre.
Taryn is here, and he's going to talk a bit about all of those awesome ideas as we move forward. And he's kind of the expert of pulling all of those threads and bringing them all together.
It's kind of like the conspiracy meme sometimes with the dots and the threads.
What are you most excited for, Taryn, with the War Within story?
Well, working on World of Warcraft is always exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love working on this world and with this team. It's been really, really, really exciting getting to work with Chris Metzen again after his return and setting the vision for the World
Questo è
Soul
stato
Saga,
un momento
this new chapter of Warcraft
che per I vecchi giocatori, insomma,
as Morgan
è
mentioned,
stato
right, like during
significativo.
Dragonflight, we feel that represented a lot of change, a lot of lessons applied, lessons learned. Looking back on Shadowlands, I believe that we took a lot from that story and developed new ways that we were going to present our characters, our villains, our storylines. And Dragonflight was the first step, but I believe that War Within is a great leap forward in our ambitions to create a compelling narrative, bring our characters to the forefront, and really open the first chapter in the next pivotal moment of World of Warcraft that will set the stakes for the story that will unfold throughout the World Soul Saga.
What would you say are some of the narrative aspirations of the saga?
Well, I feel that we've set the bar really high, and we want to meet those expectations and even exceed them. Really trying to create something in the vein of the essence of Warcraft, or the best of Warcraft, bringing that to the forefront. The ways we're going to do that is really investing in our world and story. We always say world and story are some of the most critical parts of the appeal of World of Warcraft. But what does that really mean? Our world is a character. It is fleshed out through all means of small stories, big stories. But we want people to be invested in our characters. We want them to go on the adventure with them, to learn more. I believe we have some really compelling stories with some of our most known characters, some of our lesser known characters, and some new characters that we're going to meet along the way.
Something that I love about the World Soul Saga, and we were talking about the 20th anniversary earlier, is that's a really unique strength of World of Warcraft, right? We have characters that you've literally grown up with, right? Like at the launch of World of Warcraft, Anduin, I think, was literally in a crib, right?
He was a little boy. He was a little boy. Have you seen my father?
Yeah, exactly. And we've watched him grow from that boy to the boy prince to now the king that he is today. And this journey is going to continue to take characters like Anduin and continue to see them evolve, and others as well, like Dagram plays a huge role in World Within, and that's another character that was just a little baby when we started out, and they're going to be taking a much larger role in this epic saga.
Yeah. I think another lesson we learned is cadence and delivery. There were some instances where it felt maybe like the story was very start and stop, or people had to wait around for a long time for resolutions to long-established storylines. And so in trying to address that, we're really looking at the saga as the opportunity to to resolve more storylines, bring up new questions, drive the story forward. And one of the things that helps us do that now is the improved content cadence that has been established in Dragonflight. This gives us some really, really handy tools for being able to have smaller updates between larger updates in which we can have the story move forward, we can focus on individual characters, flesh out their stories more, or even just give the
Spero
sense
tanto
that the
che però
world
gli diano un
always
ordine
moving
maledizione,
forward, and
perché
there's
se
something
no
always new to see in World of
poi ve ne
Warcraft when it
parliamo.
comes to our
Poi ne
narrative.
parliamo, sì.
Speaking of characters, Xal'atath is everywhere. She is amazing. What do you think about our new villain?
Xal'atath is very much an interesting character, and I'm super excited to see the reception that people have had since we announced that she's going to be, very much starring in the beginning of The War Within. When it comes to our villains and the development of our villains, we have learned many lessons. We feel that maybe there's been a couple instances where we didn't quite do the work to earn them out or introduce them to our players in a way that felt organic or compelling. Xal'atath is an opportunity to have this character
Ogni
that, for
riferimento a
those who played
Shadowlands è
Shadow Priest and Legion,
probabilmente voluto.
it was a very compelling character. She's marked very, very highly in terms of kind of fan favorite, but also lesser known. And that's kind of a magic combination of hey, let's take this character and bring them into the spotlight and give them a really compelling arc. And much like we had done throughout Dragonflight in the development of the primal incarnates like Iridikron and Viranoth and Farak, we put a lot of effort into bringing them into the story one step at a time, introducing them to the player, giving them compelling motivations, making them a dimensional character,
Se
making
giochi le
their
patch di fila,
desires and making them real.
se è capitato come a me che ho
that we can understand
giocato le
and get
cose
along with.
un po' al contrario,
And Xal'atath is now on
recuperandole
her
dopo.
trajectory to step into the
Maledizione.
limelight of World of Warcraft, and we're hoping to meet all of those same things. And I really feel that Xal'atath is going to be a very interesting character as we watch her story unfold.
I've been quite both surprised and excited by the reception of Xal'atath. I think having kind of those foundations where there's some of the community that's like, oh, you're just getting to know this person, where other people have, like Taryn mentioned, have been kind of questing with her or experiencing her story in the past. And there's also a lot of really fun stuff and opportunities.
Non riesco a ricordarmi,
as we
sapete,
are able to
di questa
plan
qua.
so far ahead now, where we can plant these seeds knowing, this is the destination. And as we're moving towards that direction, what are things that we can kind of plant? And maybe the players find them, maybe they see it, and maybe they don't. There was some text that showed up in Dalaran where they were talking about oh, wait a minute, that's new. What's going on here? And they were kind of piecing together some stuff.
One thing I love that we set forth to do was mid-Dragonflight, in the spirit of wanting to seed these stories sooner, to have people along for the ride, to notice the little details. And there was this moment with Iridikron when he was escaping through a portal, and in development we had just slipped this little shadow, elven silhouette in the background of the portal. And a lot of people were like, no one's ever going to notice that. And we're like, that's the idea. The idea is that it's so subtle
Porca
that when
miseria,
they
io non me ne ero
discover it,
accorto,
it's going to
per
generate all
esempio.
this conversation. And it did, right? There was all this conversation about Xal'atath, and everyone started to get really excited. And so that kind of started building a slow burn on everyone getting Xal'atath into the conversation. So by the time she was announced at BlizzCon, it actually felt like, oh, yes, we've been expecting this.
Obviously.
Obviously, right? So it's just fun ways that we're trying to seed and plant and prepare the audience for what's ahead.
I think one of the things that makes Xal'atath really, really interesting for players is there's an awful lot of them that want to be her buddy, who don't see her as a villain, right? So no villain is the villain of their story. They're the hero of their story. And that makes this interesting, too, because we can play with that a little bit. We can make sure that we're leaning into it.
Incontrata in Legion, dava l'arma del prete Shadow.
So the world is just as important
Mi
as
sa
the
che l'ho
villain.
presa,
Maria, what approach
però
have
non
you
mi
taken
ricordo,
for
è passato
world
troppo
building?
tempo.
I mean, as Taryn pointed out,
Stiamo
and I
di
think
piede a
we've
proposito.
talked about in the past, the world really is one of our main characters. And it's really important that when we go into these different zones that we've created, they feel alive, they feel appropriate to their cultures that live within them. Unexpectedly, perhaps, we decided to make this a very vertical expansion. So we're starting off on the surface in the Isle of Dorn, which has your classic plains, your beautiful grasslands, and big city, Dornogal. This is where our Earthen live, trying to carry out the edicts of the Titans. And this is where the Coreway is located. So we go down the Coreway and we get down into the Ringing Deeps. And the Ringing Deeps is where the machine speakers, the Earthen that are dedicated to tending the machines and the vast works of the Titans live and work. And so where we're really starting to subvert expectations is when you go from the ringing deeps into Hollowfall. It's a huge, huge area. You can't tell that it's underground. You can't tell that it's a cavern. It's lit by this enormous crystal. And then as you descend, you're going to go down into the last kingdom of the Nerubians, into Aj-Kahet. And this is all about danger and dark elegance. And the whole area is meant to serve as an opportunity to learn about the Nerubians and their big city there, which has been built upon centuries and centuries and centuries of decay. They just build the city on top of itself.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected that going vertically down.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we learned from Zaralek Cavern in Dragonflight. We knew we were making an underground space. We knew we wanted players to be able to transition seamlessly into that space. The idea was to sort of give you this increasingly wondrous, joyful descent, and make the world really feel alive.
A me non è che abbia fatto impazzire quella caverna in Dragonflight, devo dire. Però c'era tanta roba, quello sì.
We saw from people playing on beta when they first entered Hollowfall, which is just amazing.
Yeah, I love the attention to detail on all the zones. I mean, you just mentioned Hollowfall, but like something that it took me a while to even notice it, but when I did, it like blew my mind was, like you mentioned, there's that huge crystal underground, and it's the sole light source. So if you look around the zone, all of the trees and the plants are actually facing that light source. Like if you think about plants out in the world that kind of follow the sun, well, what if the sun was static?
We have a desire to help make everything feel right. Everything needs to feel like it makes sense. So for the Arathi, they have these airships, and so all of their tables and chairs and props and things that are scattered around their city, they all have these brackets on them because they would have been mounted on the airships when they traveled. Another good example is the earthen. So the earthen are made of stone, and their beds, entertainingly, look almost like a barbecue because they like to be warm. So there's fiery coals underneath them on their beds, and you can see them.
One of the other things I love about Earthen is they actually have these like memory crystals because they themselves are almost
mi fanno proprio venire voglia di giocare. A sto giro sì, sta
their
funzionando.
experiences, their memories, their life story in them.
No, il Silent Hill 2 ancora non ho visto i nuovi video.
Learn about that memory crystal, and Dagran, who's quite the little tinkerer, finds this fascinating, and there's like a whole quest line where you get to learn about these memory crystals and you kind of put them back in the archive, and you get to learn about this culture as you're kind of experiencing through the lens of these memory crystals.
Ecco, queste sono le queste che mi piace fare.
We have a really funny local story, a really funny sort of take on what would happen if you encountered a Nerubian who had a fear like arachnophobia, but they're terrified of bipedal creatures because they don't have enough limbs, and it's just creepy, and it freaks them out. And there's so many more examples. The team really had a great time building out these cultures and these stories.
One of the things Morgan mentioned earlier was making it easier for players to play the way they want to play. How is that being reflected in the content we're building?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly learned a lot from Dragonflight. One of the areas that we started to improve on and now have continued is some UI improvements around both the icons on quests in the world, but also the quest journal. We've got some cool filtering that will let people find the kinds of quests that they're looking for and the kinds of activities. We have some great UI elements when you hover over markers on the map that let you see what sort of reward there might be and how much time it's going to be before something starts for events, for example. Additionally, with the introduction of warbands, we know that players may not want to play the story over and over. They may choose to play it on one of their characters and then play other things. And so we've made sure to provide a lot of local stories. These are stories that tell more about zones themselves, tell about the cultures in those zones, tell about the places, different individual smaller characters. We've provided those in a slightly greater number than we had in the past. We are making sure that we're using some of our new features as well to help tell the story. So
idem, rincuorate, devo dire, piacevolmente sorpreso. Lo sono anch'io, anche se con cautela.
To see that final moment. And so we're allowing players to do a story mode version of the raid, to have that final fight without needing to go to the trouble of getting a raid group or finding, enough friends to go defeat that boss. Same thing with dungeons. We added follower dungeons that allow people to play by themselves or with friends, and followers that are controlled by the computer.
Questa
Delves is a new feature
è una
that
figata.
we're really excited about. It's intended to help those outdoor players be able to pop in and do something fun and meaningful, and maybe they only have a short period of time. Now, Delves also have a progression system and a whole bunch of other stuff associated with it, so we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to understand and enjoy the story in the way that they like to play, recognizing that everybody doesn't have as much time or
sempre io, grazie mille alle
opportunity to sit
trasmissioni
down and,
consecutive.
you know, join a
Ciao, Davide.
big group of people.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the major goals is not only with variety of things that you might be familiar with, like a lot of the cool outdoor events that you might have seen, and we want to make sure that you can kind of pick and choose the ones that you find exciting and you feel rewarded for those without feeling like you're kind of required to do everything. And then with Delves, you know, that's a new pillar of content that we're building where you wouldn't previously have been able to kind of experience this idea of like progression, but also building upon the story that we've been discussing. There's a big bad in there named Zekvir, who's kind of a lieutenant of Xalatath, and this person's in charge of looking for the world soul memories that we're going to be learning more about as we progress through the War Within, and you'll eventually be able to unlock this Zekvir's lair, which is, you know, I kind of equate it to like Onyxia's lair. So there's this big boss at the end of this experience that really feels like it's kind
Prefiero
of the cherry on
adesso
top for
poi
this
lo leggo il tuo
progression, as well
commento
as
perché
the
secondo
story
me
that
è
we're telling as you experience Delves.
assolutamente una
What's
delle
one
cose
thing
centrali.
you guys are excited for players to experience?
Oh, I think there's just some fantastic local stories out there that are helping sell some of the themes that we're exploring. We also have a fascinating situation where Anduin, who has had some pretty tough times and is doubting himself quite a bit, comes face to face with Farron, who is a great contrast. She's very strong in her faith in herself and in the light, and the two of them meeting and having this opportunity to talk to each other. I think this is also a really key and important moment.
I'm right there with Maria. I'm just excited for people to get to meet these new characters. And there's a lot of like really fun story, not only with those individual characters, but also the cultures that the team has been building. You know, a fun little detail, which isn't a spoiler, is you actually see these like lynxes that the Arathi in the zone are riding around on, and that's like a fun kind of nod to how when they set out they actually went with some elves, and there's almost like this blend of cultures that are coming together in this zone, and it's really fun to kind of see all those little details as they express themselves in the game.
I think it's always an exciting time as we draw closer to the launch of an expansion where all of the content is going to be added to the game, even stuff that was obscured or hidden during testing or PTR. This classically represents the cinematics that the team has been working on for a long time and have some really amazing moments. I think the team has done amazing work on this, and I can't wait to see people's reactions to that content. And also, you know, from all directions, every tool in our toolkit, we release more multimedia projects. I know that just recently we saw the story of Queen Ansarek in the cinematic we released, and that's in this vein of trying to build up our villains, give context, give backstory, give dimensionality, and seeing how things are stirring. And all of these different projects are coming together to really amplify and excite around the story of the War Within and set the stage for the ongoing World Soul Saga.
Thank you guys so much for joining me and talking about the World Soul Saga and the world building of the War Within.
Ok, bene ragazzi, allora un po' di considerazioni. Devo sinceramente dirvi che, come stava dicendo qualcuno, sono piacevolmente sorpreso e rincuorato, anche se con cautela. Quello che hanno mostrato fin dalla presentazione della nuova / nuove espansioni di WoW, perché per la prima volta nella storia hanno presentato una nuova saga che coprirà in realtà 3 espansioni, di cui questa è soltanto la prima. L'hanno presentata con tutta una serie di cose che è, se non esattamente, è una fetta importante di quello che mi sarebbe piaciuto vedere. In realtà mi sarebbe piaciuto vedere da tempo, quindi da un lato sono molto contento di vedere questa cosa, perché gran parte delle cose che hanno detto sono onestamente molto fighe, soprattutto per un giocatore di WoW di vecchia data, secondo me, che però abbia sposato, che abbia seguito WoW anche in retail, perché se uno poi si è fossilizzato sul Classic queste cose non interessano a niente. Però vabbè, per chi invece WoW lo segue nel suo andare avanti e nell'evolvere, non necessariamente come avrebbe voluto, molto spesso, ne so qualcosa, queste cose sono molto fighe e molto belle. Ora, qual è il punto? E il punto è perfettamente rappresentato da 2 commenti. Quello di Brefiere dice: da non giocatore di WoW mi sembra un po' strano che stiano aggiungendo così tanta quality of life dopo 20 anni. Mi sarei aspettato che molti di questi miglioramenti fossero già implementati da tempo. Boh, strano. Non potrei essere più d'accordo con te. Lo so che è strano, è uno dei problemi storici di World of Warcraft, ovvero il non rendersi conto di quello che la community chiede e non occuparsi dell'implementarli in una maniera che sembra adeguata e seguire invece dei filoni diversi, che cambiano per carità. E non è che non abbiano ascoltato, è solo che poi hanno preso comunque delle decisioni secondo quello che pareva a loro. Da un certo punto di vista potrebbe anche essere positivo se hai una chiara visione del gioco, ma nel momento in cui la chiara visione del gioco secondo me è andata a puttane ormai tanti anni fa, hanno cominciato ad andare un po' a caso. E anche Filippo scrive: mi fa un po' ridere però che la cosa di raid per la storia sia stata aggiunta ora dopo 25 anni di esistenza del gioco. 25 sono un po' tanti, sta per arrivare il ventennale di WoW in realtà, già che è quest'anno poi il ventennale di WoW, ora che ci penso, sì. Sì, lo so. Fa un po' ridere questa cosa. Tutte queste cose potevano essere implementate molto prima, avrebbero aiutato sicuramente il gioco, avrebbero reso il gioco più semplice. Questa è quality of life. Le warbands sono quality of life di base, ma sono anche una cosa che a me per esempio piace, vedere nella schermata iniziale tutti quanti i personaggi, oltre che l'incredibile comodità di scambiarsi le cose tra i vari PG, avere tutti quanti i componenti per le professioni messe da una parte o nelle sacche dei vari personaggi, bla 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 bla, e che poter essere utilizzati e avere la progressione di tante cose che sono account bound, cioè che sono legati alla warband. Da quello che ho capito dovrebbe funzionare così. Lo so, sono tutte cose fighe. Ed è giusta la domanda: cavolo, vi siete ricordati adesso? Sì, si sono ricordati adesso. E questo è una delle cose che spiega come mai la community di WoW non è esattamente contenta di Blizzard già da tanti anni. Quindi c'è questo, ragazzi. Ora, come vi dissi già alla prima presentazione, sono tutte cose fighe, quindi bene, ma l'esperienza e la storia mi insegna che bisogna avere cautela, perché Blizzard ne fa una giusta e 2 sbagliate, storicamente, e per ogni passo avanti ce ne sono 2 indietro, spesso, quindi vediamo un po' come va. Sono possibilista, ma diciamo con gli occhi molto aperti.